Hello, Force of Will players, and welcome back to another Wander Wednesday. Today, we got a nice, fun deck for you. A couple people have requested this one, and it's one of my old personal favorites as well, and that's going to be Yggdrasil Malefic Verdant Tree, or Dark Tree, or Tree 2. Had a bunch of different names, but it's basically Dark Tree Control. Okay, so getting right on into it, I got the list pulled up right here on Untap for us. So Yggdrasil Malefic Verdant Tree, if you're unfamiliar with what the card does, is it has no judgment side, so it's just purely on the ruler side, and it has you would prevent all damage that would be dealt to you, and for each 100 damage that you prevent, you instead take the top card of your deck and remove it from the game. Now, damage prevention is not loss of life, so effects that require you to pay life, opponent effects that say your opponent loses X life, those will all still go to your life total, and you can still lose the game by going to 0 life. However, any just raw damage, so like Bahamut's hitting you for 40, or other things that we'll see in the deck in a little bit, stuff like that, things that are actual damage, will instead just mill the top card of your deck. It also has the effect to tap for green and darkness, and then tap the Yggdrasil itself to get one of 4 named Seven Kings from your RFG and put it into the field. So, going straight into it, the biggest thing with Dark Tree that kind of cropped up initially when it came out, in addition to just over its tenure in other formats and over the years, is effects like Horn of Sacred Beasts. So even if you go to 0 cards, right, that's typically how you would lose, is by deck out, because that's what damage looks like. Effects like Horn that shuffle your grave into your deck prevent you from decking out. If Horn is the only card that would be in your grave on time of resolution, it'll go back into your deck to the very top, right? You draw it if there's no cards in your deck, and then you can just keep replaying the Horn. So effects that stop this are stuff like Lorite, things like Evil Elemental Uprising, Void, things that remove cards from the RFG in response, because Horn is a activated ability, and it is cost to send it to the grave. So it'll be in the grave at the time of the effect resolving, but it can be stopped, right? The other one that kind of cropped up with Tree 2 was Miracle Millennia Medicine. So this one has you can banish the card, target up to 3 non-magic stone cards in a single grave. So both Miracle Millennia Medicine and Horn can also affect your opponent's grave, so it's a kind of form of interaction as well. And then you shuffle them into your deck. So Miracle Millennia Medicine loops with 2. It can't target itself, because it does have to target. But if you have 2 of them, it can loop. It can loop with like a Horn, right? It can do stuff like that, in addition to just giving you resources back. And then finally, the third one that we got is Allosaurus, the Invader of God City. This is probably the best of the 3. The big thing with Allosaurus is you pay 0, reveal him from your hand, and then you put it on top of your deck, in your grave, or in your RFG. So you can kind of go anywhere. The main one that we'll be using is on top of the deck, right? Even if people stop it with Lorite, Feasting, things like that, you can just reactivate it. There's nothing that prevents you from activating it more than once per turn, so it works the best through cancel effects. The only real thing that would stop his effect from going off would be things like discard, if your opponent has Glint of Insight, stuff like that, to discard him to the grave, or if your opponent has a form of instant damage, right? So if they, let's say, thunder you before your draw occurs for the turn, after you've put the Allosaurus back, it can cause the Allosaurus to be RFG'd, and that's how Dark Tree loses the game. However, he is the safest of the 3 options. So I just maxed out on all copies of those, right? You can see right here, it's going to be a 60 card deck. I went to 60. Some people will play 40. Some people will play in between. There have been various versions of Dark Tree throughout the years. I just wanted to max out on 60, because there are quite a few what I would consider bricks in the deck. So Allosaurus is probably the best of the 3, and these are all your I can't lose options, right? So if your opponent just isn't running any form of instant damage, you basically just can't lose, right, with Allosaurus. They would have to have some form of discard, some form of instant damage, something like that, in order to make you lose via deck out. So next, I did order this a little bit. So next is an interesting kind of setup that I wanted to do for the deck. So Umarat Tawil, Keymaster of Outer World, has you can remove him from the game from your hand to produce red, blue, or darkness, and you can only use that to play Cthulhu's. However, he can be played from the removed area, and you can awaken him to get a resonator from your opponent's field under your control. The cool thing about Umar is if he's removed off of just Dark Tree's passive effect for damage negation, you can still play him later into the game. I know 6 is a lot of mana, but sometimes that just happens. And then you can get more bonuses off of him. You can just also play him for 3 if you so choose, and he's just an 8/8 that'll keep recurring effectively. Next is Tisiphone. So Tisiphone is a Cthulhu, so this is kind of also why I have the Umar stuff in here. And Tisiphone has, as she enters the field, you choose a number equal to 3,000 or less, and then the attack and defense of Tisiphone become the chosen number. However, when Tisiphone enters, she deals damage to you equal to your own attack. However, that's a synergy for you. Because it is damage dealt, not life loss, if you choose 3,000, you will send the top 30 cards of your deck to the RFG. That is just how that works, because it's not prevent damage that would be dealt to you by your opponent, it's prevent all damage that would be dealt to you. So if you draw 2 Umars, or you call your stone for the turn and have an Umar and a Tisiphone, you can play Tisiphone on turn 1, hit yourself for 30, have a 30/30 with Pierce, and then all these extra cards in your RFG to work off of immediately. Phantasmal Ascendant is in here for a couple reasons. One, it's just quasi stone ramp for the early turns of the game, which is where Dark Tree really suffers the most. Dark Tree has no real way to cheat mana on its own outside of Machina, which is a little bit further down. However, Machina needs turns to set up. It's 3 mana. It's weak relatively because it's a resonator. So it's just not the greatest mana cheat. However, Umar with Phantasmal Ascendant is a good, like a decent mana cheat for you. You can play Phantasmal Ascendant as the turn is ending to kind of have a stone moving into the following turn. It is also just another Cthulhu in order to get value off of Umar's mana pitch effect. So you're not purely using it for Tisiphone, you're not purely using it for Phantasmal Ascendant. He has other options that you can use it for. Velsavarian Apparition. This is one of the original cards that was in Tree. When it's in your main deck and removed from the game, you put it into your field, right? So it just... It's a free 4/4 effectively. And then Castle of Asmodeus we got in the 7th. It's the same kind of effect. When it's removed from the game by the ability of a ruler you control, funnily enough, you can put it into the field. So if it is removed from the game via Yggdrasil's ability, you get to put it into play. It gives all J resonators you control +200/+200, which means if your opponent somehow, let's say they deal 60 to you, but you have like an Allosaurus in your hand and they have no instant damage, what'll happen is you'll get your 4 Velsavarian apparitions, and then they'll all get +800/+800, which means you'll have 4 things in play that are all 1200/1200, and it allows you to kind of kill your opponent on the crackback if they have no way to actually kill you or deal with the apparitions themselves. Light of Raise and Revive, it's just a decent tech card. Not only is it removal, it also allows you to bring stuff back. It allows you to bring back your Tisiphones in order to facilitate more removal. You can bring back Machina, you can bring back Rizard, you can bring back Lorites that get removed. It's just a decent toolbox card to get things out of your RFG at instant speed. Other cards that might go into the list, this is purely off of if other people want to do this. You can play stuff like Virgilius. He is a 3-drop that you can get off of Light of Raise and Revive, or just other value 3-drops that people might want to play are also options. Machina, again, in here because you get it for free off of Yggdrasil, and it's just a mana ramp. No real reason to not really run one, at least. So it's just decent, and that's why it's in here. For Blessing of Yggdrasil, again, the deck kind of has mana problems, however, it is inherently kind of safe, right? Because with Horn and Allosaurus, you have 0 mana ways to prevent you from losing the game, so you can kind of spend turns getting set up, And that's why you can play something like Blessing of Yggdrasil on turn 2 or turn 1 if you have Energize. The reason I played Blessing over stuff like maybe Trishula or other things like that, Blessing of Yggdrasil is affected by the least amount of cards. Trishula can be stopped by Lorite, by Feathsing. I guess Blessing can be stopped by Feathsing too, but it can be stopped by like Lorite, things that stop automatic effects, stuff like that. 1-mana cards are typically pretty weak if they're not quick cast as well because of Garyon. And then quick cast cards, same kind of thing, Fair's Spell, etc., etc. So Blessing of Yggdrasil being 2 mana and a chant, not an automatic effect, is debatably better. So you can potentially play Trishula. Trishula works well with Tisiphone because of the whole like 3K thing, which means you could also maybe play stuff like Shiva Enters the Game of Gods. There are other options to look at. I just wanted to play Blessing in this version. Rezard, King of the Damned, it's just another option that you can get off of Yggdrasil. If you have enough Resonators RFG'd, he's just really large, and then he's also graveyard interaction in addition to Horn and Miracle Millennium Medicine. Dark Alice Rabbit Princess, it's kind of just to fill out the deck. The other thing is cards in your grave can't be removed, right? They can't be targeted, and they can't be removed from the game. So if your opponent is attempting to void you if they're violet, or you expect an evil elemental uprising or something like that, if you have a Dark Alice in play, you can Horn, you can Miracle Millennium Medicine, etc., etc., and it would prevent it would prevent your opponent from interacting with your grave while these cards are trying to shuffle back into the deck. So it just serves as that kind of tech. It's also just cycle, so it works like that as well. And then it has a little bit of synergy with some stones that we'll get into. Dante Enters the Game of Gods. Again, your life almost doesn't matter. Being able to give your Tisiphone an extra 4/4 and then flying, Bane, all that. It already has Pierce. Drain doesn't matter because you can't gain life under Tree. But you can kind of just buff your stuff. That option is there. The other thing is you can just pay 1,500 life to draw 3 cards. Right? You don't really need the life. It's just a value card for you. And that's why it's in there. And then we just have the counterspell suite. 4 Garyon, 4 Lorite, 4 Fair's Spell. This is pretty typical of a lot of green decks that you're going to see. A lot of green decks in general kind of just start with these 12 cards and then they move on from there. You can potentially cut copies down. However, again, in like a 60 card deck, you kind of want to fill up on 4 of the cards that you want to see in some capacity. For stones, so we have 1 Ragnarok's Fiery Stone. The reasoning for the 1 is because Yggdrasil's effect is a tap effect. So if you're calling a stone, you just get to use the free effect, right? You don't have to actually tap it and not call a stone for the turn if you have a Ragnarok's Fiery Stone. So that's why the Rag Stone is in there. You can get it off of Blessing of Yggdrasil, right? Stuff like that. Magic Stone and Moonshade, again, your life doesn't really matter. By the time you start getting your other stones, you don't need to maybe pay as much life into it, and you can do other stuff with it. Memoria of Reincarnation, a couple reasonings for this one. 1, you can sack it off of Dark Alice Rabbit Princess in order to draw a card, right? It'll draw 2 cards in that case, right? Because Dark Alice will draw you. Also, off of Phantasmal Ascendant, if you happen to hit it and it goes away, it just draws you a card. So there's just a random chance for value, and you kind of want the red for stuff like Light of Raisin Revive, like Phantasmal Ascendant, things like that in the deck. Allosaurus, and then you're predominantly green for the most part, so that's why it's green. And then Magic Stone of Black Silence, again, you need the darkness for Yggdrasil, you need the darkness for Tisiphone, you need the darkness for Dante Enters the Game of Gods, Garyon's second effect. You need more darkness type effects, or darkness, you have more darkness type effects, so it is just better to have more darkness mana than more Memoria of Reincarnations. So that is the list. Side deck stuff, again, I don't really do side deck stuff. Feel free to let me know what your guys' lists for Dark Tree might be looking like, what sideboard decks you've maybe seen, what decks it's been good against or maybe poor against. Let me know down in the comments section. A little bit later this week, this Friday, I'm going to put out a post with this video as well. I'm going to be doing a stream for a bunch of just rulings in order to get ready for the Wanderer event that's coming in the next couple of weeks. So I hope to see you all there. Thank you so much for stopping by and watching the video, and I hope you have a great rest of your day. Bye-bye.